Welcome back to the Mid Podcast. I know we've been on hiatus for about a week. I do apologize. I spent last weekend in Nashville watching the Foo Fighters. Freaking awesome. Anyway, today I am back with a review of House of Dragon Season 3, Episode 8, which was our finale, which aired on August 9th. So I apologize for being late, but Foo Fighters House of Dragon review. I'm going with Foo Fighters. Sorry. Anyway, I need you to make sure you like and subscribe. Send the video to your wonderful dragon loving friends so we can get more eyes on the channel. And let's get into it. If you notice in the title, we have titled this episode Everybody Has Lost Their Damn Mind. And basically, that's what they've done. So we have reached the end of Season 3. Alright, with it being officially over, and apparently the writers decided that, we'll wait, I don't know, 3 more years before you get Season 4. I guess I need to make this a good review. I don't know if I can wait that long, but maybe I can find something to fill the time. I do believe one of my shows may be coming back. Anyway, so House of Dragon Season 3 is finally over, and the writers decided that subsequently was no longer needed. Because in this finale, our writers basically said, "You want dragons? Here they are! We have dragons! You want betrayal? Guess what? You're gonna have some betrayal. You want death? Death comes knocking on the door. You want somebody to make a rational decision? Whoa, 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 whoa. Let's not get too ridiculous here. This is still House of Dragon. But before I get into anything else, there may be spoilers. So if you have not seen the season finale and I've given you 2 weeks, give or take, don't be mad at me. So, episode 8 was titled The Treasons at Tumbleton. And that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about Ulf, Tumbleton, Ormond, Roddy the Ruin, Hugh, my favorite character, Damon, Rhaenyra, Aegon, Aemond, Alicent, which kind of digging them as a couple, Darren, Alan, Corliss, and Helena. And I'm going to say this immediately. This might be the most important episode House of Dragon has ever produced. Not necessarily because it's the best. We can debate that. But because this is the episode where the show finally stops asking, who deserves the Iron Throne? And it starts asking, why the hell does anybody still want it? And looking around, everyone is miserable. Everyone is traumatized. You got half the country burning down. You got people starving. You got families destroying themselves, which seems like an everyday occurrence in House of Dragon. You got dragons turning towns into major barbecue pits. But yet, everybody keeps saying, but technically, according to succession law, who cares? There is no Tumbleton anymore. That's what I loved about the finale. The throne is becoming increasingly irrelevant compared with the destruction being committed in its name. And that's why I'm going to do this review a little differently. We're not going to go scene by scene. Instead, we're asking one question about every major player. So, when the war finally forced them to choose, what did they choose? Because that is what this finale was really about. Choices. Ulf chooses resentment. Helena chooses control over her own fate. Damon, well, you know Damon. He's always gonna choose war. Rhaenyra, yeah, she's kind of a little power hungry bitch, so she chooses power. Alan chooses loyalty. Armin chooses cruelty. Roddy chooses death. Hugh chooses family. And almost every choice makes the world worse. So, pour yourself something strong, preferably something that has not been sitting next to Olaf in the tavern, because we need to talk about the finale. So, in segment 1, let's talk about Aegon being alive, and Rhaenyra immediately starts spiraling. And this episode begins with that important piece of information. Aegon, he's still alive. You know, he looked like he spent a little much too time in the barbecue pit, but importantly, he survived. What is also most important, Sunfire is alive? What the hell? I love this opening because you immediately understand why this terrifies Rhaenyra. It isn't simply Aegon survived, it's symbolism. Aegon has basically become Westeros' political version of a cockroach. This man has been burned, broken, beaten, removed from power, hidden, humiliated, pretty much written off, and yet he keeps showing back up. At some point, Rhaenyra has to be thinking, can somebody please kill this man correctly? Because every time Aegon survives, his claim becomes stronger symbolically. So, he survived Dragonfire. His dragon survived. He disappeared. And now, voila, he's back. To the people of Westeros, that doesn't necessarily look like luck. That looks like divine favor. And Rhaenyra, well, she understood this immediately. Which is why her reaction is so important. Because earlier Rhaenyra might have responded politically. She might have asked, where is he? Who supports him? What forces does he have? Could we negotiate? Finale Rhaenyra? She doesn't think like that anymore. She thinks, threat. Threats? Yeah, they need to be eliminated. That's the transformation of Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra spent much of the series insisting that she was different from the men around her. She didn't want unnecessary war. She didn't want unnecessary bloodshed. Just wanted legitimacy, some recognition. But now, oh no, now Rhaenyra has become queen bitch and has begun confusing legitimacy with destiny. And those things are very different. Because once someone believes that history itself has selected them, most people in political power, especially in medieval times, um, opposition stops becoming disagreement. Opposition becomes evil, which is dangerous. And our boy Damon, well, he actually recognizes what's happening, which is hilarious considering that Daemon Targaryen is suddenly the emotionally stable person in the room. Yeah, that is when you know Westeros is in trouble. If Daemon is giving you the maybe calm down look, you might have gone a little bit too far. Alrighty, let's switch gears and talk about Rhaenyra and has she become the thing she claimed she wasn't? Well, again, Emmy Darcy is outstanding in this episode acting wise. And I think the writers finally committed to something they have flirted with for 3 seasons. Rhaenyra is not simply a victim of history anymore. She's becoming the architect of tragedy. That's important. Because sometimes the fandom discussion around Rhaenyra becomes, well, she had the stronger claim. Okay, maybe. But having the stronger legal claim does not automatically make someone a good ruler. France. Those are separate questions. And this episode makes that distinction brutally clear. Look at what Rhaenyra does. Baela confronts her, and what happens? She doesn't listen. She reminds Baela who's queen. Mysaria becomes inconvenient. Fuck a bitch and then you're gone. Call the Uber bitch, you're out the door. Helena, well, she refuses to cooperate. So, Rhaenyra force feeds her. The High Septon refuses to legitimize her rule. So, she removes him. Aegon returns. She panics. Corlys becomes questionable. Suspicion. Everybody around Rhaenyra is slowly being transformed from a person into a political asset. And that is exactly what Helena calls out. Rhaenyra doesn't see people anymore. She sees usefulness. Useful, not useful, loyal, potentially disloyal, dragon rider, hostage, advisor, threat. Well, that's not very good leadership. That is paranoia with a crown. And the terrifying thing is, Rhaenyra believes she's doing it for a higher purpose. That's where the prophecy becomes important. Because the Song of Ice and Fire used to function as a burden, something Viserys entrusted to her, now it functions as justification. There is a mass difference between I must rule because the realm needs protection and everything I do is justified because destiny says I must rule. The second mentality is how tyrants sleep at night. And when Rhaenyra publicly starts presenting herself through the prophetic destiny, that's when I said, oh, we're here now. She isn't merely claiming the throne, she is sanctifying herself. And Westeros, well, has seen enough rulers who believe God personally endorsed their resume. So, Helena. Interesting. Well, Helena finally tells Rhaenyra the truth, which, Rhaenyra doesn't want to hear. And this is where the jokes are going to slow down, because Helena's ending, it's kind of devastating. For 3 seasons, Helena has been one of the strangest characters on the show. Not strange in a negative sense, strange because she exists differently from everyone else. Everyone else lives in the present. Helena does not. She lives simultaneously in what is happening, what has happened, and what is going to happen. Imagine how horrifying that extension would be. Sometimes people treat her visions like superpower. I don't. I kind of think they're a curse. Because what good is knowing the future when nobody understands you? She warned people. Nobody listened to her. She saw things. Nobody understood. And eventually, well, she just gave up and stopped trying to explain, which is tragic. And her confrontation with Rhaenyra is one of my favorite scenes in the finale, especially the beetle discussion. Helena describes something tiny, something seemingly insignificant, something that exists within King's Landing because of the filth produced by the city. And Rhaenyra basically has no interest in it, and Helena understands exactly what that means. Rhaenyra cares about the city, but increasingly she doesn't care about the individual living inside the city. She cares about King's Landing because King's Landing represents power. Helena cares about the beetle. That's the difference between them. Helena notices small life. Rhaenyra increasingly notices only power. And then Rhaenyra has Helena force fed. That scene bothered me more than some of the violence at Tumbleton, because there is something deeply disturbing about it. Rhaenyra isn't keeping Helena alive because she loves her. She is keeping her alive because Helena and her unborn child have political value. That's the moment Helena understands something. She isn't a prisoner, she's inventory. So, why does Helena choose death? And this is a question people are going to debate. Why does Helena kill herself? I don't think the answer is simple. She's depressed. That's far too simplistic for the show, what the show has built. I think Helena's decision operates on three levels. First, she understands what Rhaenyra intends. Rhaenyra needs leverage against Aegon. Helena is leverage. Her unborn child is leverage. And as long as they remain alive, well, Rhaenyra can use them. Helena now knows Aegon survived. So what does that mean? Her captivity isn't ending. It may actually become more valuable. If Aegon gains power, Helena becomes more valuable as a hostage. If Aegon loses power, Helena becomes less useful. Neither outcome gives Helena freedom. Second, Helena has already seen what is coming. This is the crucial difference between her and almost everyone else. Most characters fear death. Helena appears to understand death. She has spent years seeing fragments of things before they happen. She understands that history is moving towards something terrible. So her decision isn't necessarily surrender. It may be the first completely autonomous decision she has ever made in her life. Think about Helena's existence. Her father decided the family structure. She was married to Aegon, her brother. She became queen because others crowned him. She became a mother because dynasty requires heirs. Her children became political symbols. Her son was murdered because of someone else's war. Her mother made decisions supposedly for her protection. And Aemon wanted to use her dragon. Rhaenyra wants to use her prophetic ability. Then Rhaenyra wants to use her pregnancy. Everybody uses Helena, and I do mean everybody. And then Helena finally makes one decision nobody else can control. It is horrifying, it is tragic, but dramatically, it is agency. Her final act says, "You do not get to decide what happens to me anymore." And this brings us to my third reason. Helena takes Rhaenyra's leverage away. This is political. Helena understands that her continued existence gives Rhaenyra power over Aegon. The unborn child gives Rhaenyra even more power. So Helena removes both pieces from the chessboard. It is devastating because the gentlest person in this war finally participates in the war by refusing to participate anymore. She doesn't burn anybody. She doesn't stab anybody. She doesn't order an execution. She just simply removes herself. And that act may have enormous political consequences in the future. So, what does Helena's final message actually mean? Let's talk about that tapestry. Because this is where the finale becomes fascinating. Rhaenyra enters Helena's room after her death, and what gets Rhaenyra's attention? Not Helena's dead body, the tapestry. That tells you everything. Helena's final prophetic image depicts Rhaenyra associated with the Iron Throne, but the image is surrounded by blood, fire, dragons, and desperate figures. And I think the message is pretty straightforward. The throne, it will be Rhaenyra's end. Not necessarily you will never sit throne. That's different. The prophecy may actually be more cruel than that. It may be saying you will get what you want and it will destroy you. That's much better dramatically. Because failure is easy. Imagine spending your entire life chasing something and never getting it. That's tragic. But imagine getting it and then discovering that obtaining it costs you everything: your children, your allies, your morality, your family, your reputation, your humanity, maybe even your life. Well, yep, that's pretty much House of the Dragon. The throne isn't the prize. The throne is basically the trap. And here's what makes the ending even better. I don't think Rhaenyra understands the warning correctly. She sees herself on the throne. Yay! That's what she wanted to see. Remember what I've been saying about Rhaenyra? She interprets everything through destiny. So Helena leaves her a warning. And Rhaenyra probably interpreted it as validation. Well, that's brilliant. Helena essentially leaves a giant sign saying, "Danger, bridge out ahead." But Rhaenyra goes, "Excellent, a sign confirming I'm on the correct road. Girl, no, turn around." But of course, she won't. Because prophecy becomes dangerous when people interpret according to what they already want to believe. Viserys understood prophecy as responsibility. Rhaenyra now understands prophecy as entitlement. And Helena's tapestry appears to warn that this confusion will destroy her. And then Rhaenyra just closes the window. That final image matters. Helena exits through that window. Rhaenyra closes it, and symbolically, Helena sees. Rhaenyra refuses to see, and that's the finale. Alright, let's talk about Ulf. The idiot with Silverwing. What are you doing? His decision at Templeton is simultaneously horrifying, stupid, understandable, petty, tragic, and completely consistent with who he has become. I kind of liked it because I don't think he burns Tumbleton because he suddenly becomes ideologically green. I think he doesn't care about either. He doesn't care about green versus black. He cares about himself. And that has always been the danger. The great mistake everyone made with the dragon seeds was assuming. You know what they say about assuming? The first three letters are ASS, and when you assume, you usually make an ass out of yourself. So, dragon plus rider equals loyal soldier? Nope, not exactly. Dragon plus rider equals person with a dragon? That's very different. He suddenly possesses one of the most destructive weapons in the world. But emotionally, he's still himself. He still has insecurity, resentment. He still wants respect. He still wants status. And of course, you can still find him in the tavern drinking. And now, and now anybody who humiliates him is humiliating a man with a nuclear weapon. Yeah, that's a problem. A very big problem. A Silverwing sized problem, I would say. So, why does he burn Tumbleton? Well, look at what happens before the betrayal. He is drunk. Ormond finds him. Ormond humiliates him. Not privately, but publicly. He beats him and berates him and treats him like garbage. And the scene even strips him of physical dignity. And all this matters because, Ormond fundamentally misunderstands the new political reality. He thinks Ulf is beneath him. Socially, well, more than likely, sure. Traditionally, well, absolutely. But militarily, homeboy, He kind of got a dragon. All right, buddy. I'll let you be, and Ormond, you do you, baby. Maybe don't humiliate the man whose emotional support animal can incinerate your entire zip code. I don't know, I'm just saying. This is the great contradiction of the dragon seeds. The nobility wants their power without granting them equality. Rhaenyra does it, Ermin does it, basically everybody does it. But then they want Olaf to behave like a weapon, and he knows he is the person holding the weapon. And after Ormond humiliates him, well, he decides, fuck you, I can burn everybody. Black, green, soldier, civilian, I don't give a fuck. That's basically what he says. And that's what makes his decision so terrifying. This isn't strategic betrayal, it's resentment with dragonfire. And that is why Tumilton works. Because the battle stops being about military strategy and becomes chaos. Nobody controls Silverwing except Olaf, and nobody controls him. Alright, Tumilton is the real point of the season. The battle, spectacular. But I don't think spectacle is the point here. The horror is the point. This episode initially gives us something resembling traditional medieval warfare. I love traditional medieval warfare. Because you sit here and think, what the frick are you guys doing? Anyway, you have walls, you have archers, you have infantry, cavalry, siege strategy, winter wolves, Daemon, Caraxius, and then the emotionally unstable dude on a dragon. And suddenly all of that strategy becomes irrelevant. Well, that's kind of what dragons do. They destroy the rules. You can spend 6 months preparing your army. You can develop the greatest tactical plan in Westeros. You can position every soldier perfectly. And then, well, somebody says, let's blow the shit up. Well, congratulations. Your strategy is now charcoal. That's why the aftermath matters more than the battle itself. Daemon walking through Tumbleton is one of the most important moments of this episode, because Daemon has spent his entire life romanticizing violence. He loves war, he loves danger, he loves his dragon, he loves being feared. But Tumbleton forces him to see what dragon warfare actually means. And not from the saddle, but from the ground. Burned civilians, dead bodies laying around, destroyed homes, people stumbling through the ruins. That is the dance of the dragons. Not kings, not queens, not succession law. This, well, ordinary people paying for aristocratic ambition. Alrighty, let's talk about Roddy the Ruin. I came south to die and business is booming. Yeah, that's basically what he says. I think this man is kind of insane, but I kind of like him. The Winter Wolves basically arrive in Westeros with one retirement plan: death. That's it. No pension, no vacation, no Florida, no Bahamas. Nope. Just, I would like to die violently somewhere warm. And Roddy spends this battle looking like a man who finally found the restaurant he's been trying to get reservations for. Everyone else, we might die. Roddy, promise! His fight with Ormond is brutal. It's ugly, it's exhausting, and it perfectly summarizes the difference between them. Ormond wants to survive because Ormond wants power. Roddy wants a worthy death. You cannot intimidate someone who has already accepted death. That is why Roddy is terrifying. And then he continues fighting after losing an arm. Yeah, well, of course he does. At that point, Roddy is basically running on northern spite. So, how do we feel about Armin's death? I'm kind of conflicted about this. Not because I didn't like the character was an asshole, but James Norton made Orman one of the most entertaining additions to this season. Orman was awful, but he was kind of entertainingly awful. Yes, that was kind of the difference. He's an arrogant prick, cruel, manipulative, classic, hypocritical, and somehow constantly looks like he just smelled something unpleasant. Probably because half the season he actually did. But Orman, well, he understood politics. He understands fear, propaganda. He understands Darren's value. He understands that war isn't merely about armies, it's about narratives. And then he uses children as human shields. At that point, sir, your karma account is officially overdrawn. You cannot knight Darren and invoke the ideals of chivalry while placing children between yourself and a dragon. Hello? That contradiction is intentional. Orman represents the lie of Aristotelical honor. These nobles constantly talk about honor, duty, chivalry, bloodlines, tradition. And the moment their lives are threatened, we'll put the children by the wall. Oh, so that's where the honor went, sir? Good to know. And then Roddy gets him. Their fight is vicious. Roddy loses an arm. Orman thinks he has him. And Roddy basically decides, if I'm dying, you're coming with me, boy. Then that injury. I don't even know how to discuss it politely. Let's just say this. Norman Hightower receives a final reminder from the north in an extremely southern location. And then Silverwing burns both of them. Roddy welcomes it. Orman is terrified. That difference matters. Roddy got exactly what he wanted. Orman lost everything he wanted. So, how do I feel about Orman's death? As a viewer, I'm gonna miss the character. As a human being, watching this fictional man use children as dragon shields, sir, your checkout time has arrived. But I'll give him this. He did not leave quietly. So let's talk about Darren. The daring, eventually. So Darren remains fascinating. Because Darren may be one of the few members of this family who hasn't completely lost his moral center yet. That's the very important word here, yet. The knighting scene matters because Orman is constructing Darren as a symbol. Darren the Daring. It's branding. Westeros invented public relations. Give the handsome young prince a cool nickname. Put him on a dragon. Tell everyone he's brave. Boom! Political campaign. But Darren hasn't fully become the image yet. That's what makes him interesting. He isn't Aemond. Aemond walks into a room like he's hoping somebody gives him an excuse. Darren still appears frightened by what war requires. I kind of like that. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage means acting despite the fear. Now, the question for next season is whether Darren becomes genuinely heroic or whether the war corrupts him like everyone else. Guess we will see. Alright, Gawain might be one of the less decent men left, and he deserves some credit. Because while Orman chooses escalation, he quietly attempts negotiation. He frees Corlys. He brings him to Daemon. He tries to stop the slaughter. Think about that. Gawain knows how dangerous this is. He knows Daemon could kill him, but he tries. That, folks, is courage. And the proposed division of Westeros is fascinating because it reveals something nobody wants to admit. Their solutions instead of war. They just didn't want them. So the war doesn't continue because peace is impossible. The war continues because the people fighting it consider compromise worse than death. That's the difference. I mean, Damon could have negotiated. Rhaenyra could have negotiated. The Greens could have negotiated. Nobody wants half a victory. Everybody wants everything. So, guess what, everybody? You get ashes. So, Damon finally sees what Damon created. Now, Damon might have had the most quietly important arc in the episode. Early Damon would have loved Tumbleton. Dragonfire, war, chaos, fear, Caraxes smashing through defenses. This is his natural habitat. But afterward, Damon looked destroyed, and Matt Smith plays it beautifully. He doesn't need a speech. He sees the consequences of the war. The war that he basically wanted. Not specifically dead civilians, but war. And you cannot ask for war and then act surprised when war behaves like war. That is one of the major themes of this entire series. Everybody thinks they can control violence. Viserys thought he could control succession. Otto thought he can control Aegon. Alicent thought she could control events. Rhaenyra thought she could control dragon seeds. Ormond thought he can control Olaf. Damon thinks he can control war. Nobody can. Once violence begins, violence develops its own momentum. And Tumbleton, that's the lesson. So let's talk about Hugh Hammer, the man who actually has something human left. Now, Hugh's story kind of hurts. It's kind of tragic. Because, he goes to Tumbleton for a deeply personal reason. Kat, his wife. He leaves his assigned position. He goes where he believes he needs to go. And still, well, he cannot save her. And that is important because Hugh has enormous power now. He has Vithmore, one of the greatest dragons alive, and it means nothing. He could burn armies, he could destroy castles, he could change wars, but he cannot save the person he loves. This story sounds like Anakin Skywalker and Padme in Star Wars. What the hell? Alrighty. Now that you have put those pieces together, the same as it was with Anakin is the same with Hugh. It is the cruel irony that power does not equal control. And finding Kat dead, that's potentially the moment that changes Hugh permanently. Because now what loyalty does he owe Rhaenyra? From his perspective, homegirl, I risked my life. I claimed this dragon. I fought for you. My family suffered. My wife died. And you're going to call me disloyal? Bitch, please. That resentment, it's going somewhere. And wherever his dragon goes, the resentment is going with it. I really think everybody on the chessboard probably should get the hell out of Dodge. And I mean quickly. Alrighty, let's talk about Alan. I've kind of grown to like Alan. But why is he so loyal? His loyalty probably is fascinating precisely because Corlys hasn't exactly earned unconditional love from him. And that's what makes Alan different from other characters like Olaf. Olaf sees status and asks, what do I get? Alan sees responsibility and asks, what needs to be done? I think that's the key. Alan's loyalty isn't blind worship. It isn't Corlys is my father, therefore everything is forgiven. No, Alan has resentment toward his father. He knows what Corlys failed to give him: recognition, legitimacy, a father present, a place. But Alan also understands something Corlius has spent his entire life preaching. A name isn't the same as a legacy. Alan's loyalty is tied to duty, to sailors, to Driftmark, to the Valorian legacy, to the people around him, and increasingly to the identity he is building for himself. That's why I don't read Alan as weak for remaining loyal. I read him as disciplined. Olaf allows humiliation to determine his allegiance. Alan refuses to let resentment determine his character. That's some strength. He can't resent Corlius and still refuses to become consumed by that resentment. Those two feelings can exist simultaneously. You can say, "You failed me as a father," and still say, "I will not allow your failures to decide what kind of man I become." That's pretty much Alan, and that is why his loyalty feels different. He isn't loyal because he has forgotten. He's loyal because he remembers and chooses duty anyway. That makes him one of the more emotionally mature characters in a show where grown adults routinely settle family disagreements with dragons. So, Corlius, the man who keeps surviving everybody's war. He continues to be fascinating because he has gradually become less interested in glory and more aware of the cost. Remember early Corlius? Legacy, name, history, power, recognition. He wanted House Valorian remembered. Well, congratulations, my guy. Everybody will remember you. Mostly because your family has been emotionally fed through a wood chipper. Corlius's journey has been watching ambition collect its bill. And by the finale, he understands the war differently from Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra still thinks victory can justify sacrifice. Corlius increasingly understands that eventually sacrifice becomes the only thing left. That's why his relationship with Alan matters. Alan represents something Corlius cannot solve politically. He cannot command his way into fatherhood. He cannot give Alan a title and erase the years of absence. He has to earn something. And Corlius isn't accustomed to earning personal forgiveness. Alright, so Bela has finally had enough. And her confronting Rhaenyra was long overdue. And thank God somebody finally said it. Because Bela essentially tells Rhaenyra, "You use people." And Bela isn't wrong. Rhaenyra's response actually proves it. She doesn't answer Bela emotionally. She answers her hierarchically. She reminds her who has the power. And that's where the problem is. See, Bela isn't talking to the queen. She's talking to family. And Rhaenyra responds, not as family, but as queen. That tells us Rhaenyra is losing the ability to distinguish between the two identities. Everybody becomes a subject, even family. Once a ruler starts interpreting disagreements as disobedience, yeah, bad things, they tend to follow. Alrighty, Miss Sarah. Girl gets discarded like the bath water that you just took a bath in. And her situation? Just another example of Rhaenyra using people when they're useful. So, Mysteria, intelligence, small folk, political strategy, emotional intimacy. Then suspicion enters the relationship. And suddenly, Pentos, pack your bags, no goodbye. That's kind of cold. I mean, Rhaenyra, you just hit it and quit it, girl. And Mysteria retaliates in the most Mysterio possible way. She gives Helena information. Not a sword, not poison, information. Aegon lives. and Rhaenyra intends to use Helena and her unborn child. Mysaria understands that information can be more destructive than weapons. And it is. Alright, let's talk about Alicent. Girl, you cannot keep walking away from your consequences. Now, she doesn't dominate the finale, but her presence does matter. Because Alicent has spent much of the series trying to manage consequences after helping create most of them. Helena's death destroys that illusion. Alicent keeps thinking, maybe I can save this person, maybe I can negotiate that, maybe I can leave, maybe I can fix something. But the machinery is already moving. That's why the butterflies are beautiful and awful. She knows before anybody tells her something is gone. And now Alicent has to live with another devastating truth. She left Helena, she promised she would return, and she didn't return in time. That guilt is going to be enormous. So, Aemon remains one of the most dangerous people in Westeros. But I think this season has done something interesting. It has exposed the insecurity beneath the monster. Aemon wants everyone to believe he's inevitable. Okay, Thanos. That he's fearless, calculated, unbreakable. But his entire identity is built around control. And Helena has always been terrifying to him because she sees through control. She knows things he cannot dominate. She told him his fate, and he couldn't intimidate prophecy. He couldn't stab prophecy. He couldn't send Vhagar after prophecy. And now Helena is gone. So the question becomes, what does Aemon do when one of the only people who truly understood what he was is no longer there? I don't think it's going to make him softer. In fact, it's probably going to make him much worse. Alright, let's talk about Aegon. The man that refuses to die. Is that his superpower? I mean, his greatest political skill at this point is apparently, I think I will continue to remain alive just out of spite to fuck all of y'all. And it kind of is working. He becomes strangely compelling because he has lost almost everything that originally defined him. The crown, his body, his authority, his family structure, his dragon, temporarily apparently, his dignity, and yet he's still here. That is something dangerous about a claimant who has nothing left to lose. Early Aegon wanted the comforts of kingship. Now, Aegon wants survival, maybe a little revenge, and that is more dangerous because Rhaenyra has something to protect, and Aegon increasingly does not. So, why is Tumbleton so important? And this is why I think it works so well. The battle, well, we didn't get a meaningful winner. Yes, we had military positions change. Yes, people will claim victory. Yes, armies did survive. But did you see the town? Who won? Not Tumbleton. That's the point. History books would record great victory, Black defeated, Dragon betrayal, Commander killed, territory gained. But the ordinary people will remember, my house burned, my husband died, my daughter died, my children died. That's the difference between political history and human history. And House of the Dragon is strongest when it remembers that. Kings call battles victories. Small folks, they call them disasters. Alrighty, let's compare Olaf and Alan, the secret character comparison. This is something I think this episode quietly gave us. Both come from outside elite aristocratical power. Both have reasons to resent the nobility. Both have experienced exclusion. Both suddenly gain proximity to enormous power. But their response, very different. Olaf says, "You treat me like nothing, so now I owe you nothing." Alan says, "You treat me unfairly, but I still decide who I am." That's fascinating because House of the Dragon isn't saying mistreatment automatically creates betrayal. It's telling us mistreatment creates choices. Olaf chose grievance. Alan chose responsibility. Neither response erases what happened to them, but their choices, that's what will define them. That's why I think Alan is more important than people realize. He's the counter argument to Olaf. Alright, Ormond's fatal mistake. That comparison helps explain Ormond's death. Ormond thinks hierarchy is permanent. Lord, knight, bastard, commoner, dragon seed, prince. Everyone has a place. The problem? Yeah, dragons, well, they kind of destroy your hierarchy. And once Olaf claims Silverwing, the old social structure doesn't disappear culturally, but militarily. It's gone. Ormond can call Olaf whatever he wants. Olaf can kill him. That changes that relationship. And Ormond doesn't understand that. He thinks humiliation will restore authority. Instead, it produces retaliation. And that is why beating Olaf is probably Ormond's single dumbest decision. And that's saying something for a man who used children as dragon shields. Alrighty. So the real villain isn't just one person. And we need to figure out who is the villain now. Rhaenyra? Aegon? Aemond? Daemon? Olaf? The Greens? The Black? The final answer, I believe, the war itself. Because war rewards everyone's worst qualities. Rhaenyra's entitlement becomes tyranny. Daemon's aggression becomes slaughter. Olaf's insecurity becomes mass murder. Ormond's arrogance becomes cruelty. Aemond's insecurity becomes brutality. Aegon's resentment becomes vengeance. Even honorable people become participants in horror. And that's kind of what a civil war does. Nobody controls it, but everybody thinks one more battle, one more dragon, one more execution, one more sacrifice, then we win. But every escalation creates another reason for retaliation. That's the dance. Not a dance between two queens, a dance between action and revenge. Alrighty. I keep coming back to Helena because everybody asks who wins. Helena seems to understand the more important question. What does winning mean? She sees Rhaenyra on the throne, but she also sees blood, fire, dragons, desperation. Maybe that's the ultimate message. Rhaenyra wins and loses at the same time. Because the Iron Throne, well, it can't restore Jace, it cannot restore Luke, it cannot undo Tumbleton, it cannot restore Helena, it cannot repair Alicent, it cannot give Daemon innocence, it cannot make Aegon whole, it cannot make Aemond peaceful, and it can't give Corlys his family back. That's why the throne becomes absurd. Everybody is destroying the things that actually matter so they can possess the thing that doesn't. Okay, what I loved. So, let's grade this thing. First, the Battle of Tumbleton. Fantastic! Not simply visually impressive, narratively coherent. You understand where people are, you understand the objectives, you understand why the plans change, and you understand how the chaos develops. That's crucial. Second, Emma Darcy, outstanding. Rhaenyra's perform Rhaenyra's transformation works because it isn't played like, oh, I'm evil now. It's quieter. She genuinely believes she's becoming stronger. That is much scarier. Third, Helena. Helena has always been understated, and her final performance maintains that. There was no giant monologue, no screaming speech, no theatrical farewell, just exhaustion, understanding, and decision. Alrighty. Fourth, Damon. Matt Smith. Damon's post battle reaction might be some of his best work in this series. And I'm a little sad if I think what happens in season 4 happens. Alright, fifth, Tom Bennett as Olaf, because he makes Olaf's betrayal horrifying while keeping it psychologically understandable. Not justified, understandable. Those are different. And let's talk about James Norton and Tommen Flanagan. Armin versus Roddy was everything I wanted from two lunatics meeting in the middle of a collapsing battlefield. Now, I do have some criticism. I think I needed some more Darren. We spent too much time building Darren for the finale to keep delaying the payoff. I get understanding material. I mean, hell, I watch wrestling. But eventually, the check has to clear the bank. Alrighty, next. Some character movements feel compressed because this episode has so much to accomplish. There were moments where you can almost hear the writer saying, okay, we got 20 minutes left and 9 characters still need emotional breakdowns. Let's go, let's go, let's go! And third, I think some viewers will feel Helena's death needed more breathing room. I understand your criticism, but thematically, I think the reasoning works. But because Helena is so important emotionally, I would have happily spent another 5 minutes with her. Alrighty. I'm gonna need season 4 to deal seriously with the consequences of Tumbleton. Don't give me, anyway, next battle, move on. Nope, nope, nope. You just obliterated a whole goddamn town. People need to react to that. Rumors need to spread. The small folk need to respond. Armies need to respond. Dragon Riders need to understand what just happened. Otherwise, Tumbleton becomes spectacle instead of a tragedy. Okay, let's hand out some awards. So, my MVP of the episode is Helena. Not because she wins everything, but because she understood what nobody else does. My performance MVP goes to Emma Darcy. This episode had needed Rhaenyra's transformation to work. And worked it did. My most chaotic, Roddy the Ruin. Gotta love him. The man showed up looking for death and treated Tumbleton like LinkedIn finally found him the perfect career opportunity. The worst decision. That has to go to Armin beating Olaf. Congratulations, you publicly humiliated the unstable alcoholic currently renting one of the largest flamethrowers in Westeros. He must have a hookup with Darby Allin, who loves flamethrowers, and if you watch AEW, you know what I'm talking about. Armin, excellent management skills, boy. I got to tell you. Alrighty, your second worst decision would be Olaf responding by burning everybody. Sir, there were intermediate options we could have addressed. I mean, you could have filed a complaint with HR instead of turning it into a barbecue pit. The most tragic was Hugh finding Cat because all the power in the world could not save the one person who mattered, aka Star Wars. Alrighty, our most underrated, Alan, because in a story about people allowing resentment to define them, Alan repeatedly chooses duty without pretending the resentment isn't there. Our best exit, Roddy, by far. My man got the Warrior's death he ordered 3 episodes ago. My most deserving exit has to go to Orman. Sorry, dude. Once the children became shields, your subscription to life, yeah, I think it kind of got rejected. Alrighty. What does the finale say about our queen? The biggest takeaway from the finale is simple. Rhaenyra crossed the line. That doesn't mean she suddenly became a cartoon villain. That's what makes this interesting. She still has legitimate grievances, still has suffered enormous loss, still has reasons to believe the throne was stolen from her, but suffering does not grant moral immunity. That's important. Rhaenyra, well, can be wronged and become wrong. Both can be true. She can have the stronger claim and still be a worse ruler. Again, two things can be true at the same time. She can love her children and use other people's children politically. That's complexity. And that's the Rhaenyra I want this show to explore. Not Saint Rhaenyra, not Monster Rhaenyra, but Rhaenyra Targaryen, a traumatized, ambitious, increasingly paranoid ruler who believes destiny has authorized her decisions. That's what will be interesting. Alrighty, and we will end with this window. The final image. Helena is dead. Rhaenyra sees the tapestry. She sees herself, sees the throne, sees fire, sees blood. Homegirl closes the window. Okay, that is such a simple image, but it's perfect because the entire season has been about people receiving warnings and choosing to ignore them. Visions, prophecies, advice, family, the small folk, consequences. Everybody receives warnings. Nobody listens. Helena's final warning isn't spoken, it's sown, and Rhaenyra sees it. The question is whether she understands it. I don't think she does, and that's why the ending works. So, let's give our final verdict. House of the Dragon Season 3 did something I wasn't sure the series would actually commit to. It stopped protecting its characters, not physically, morally. Rhaenyra isn't protected by some protagonist status anymore. Daemon isn't protected by charisma, although that homeboy got some. Woo, doggy. Alicent isn't protected by regret. Nobody cares about this bitch. Aegon isn't simply pathetic, which he kinda is now. Aemon isn't simply monstrous, which is kinda sexy and hot in a strange way. Olaf isn't simply comic relief. Helena isn't simply the strange girl who says prophetic things in the corner. Everybody's choices matter now, and Tumbleton is where those choices decided to collide. That's why I think the finale works. It isn't really about who wins the battle, because we know nobody wins. Ormond dies, Roddy dies, Cat dies, Helena dies, Tumbleton burns to ashes. We get Daemon traumatized, Hugh is devastated, Olaf has crossed a line he cannot uncross, Rhaenyra has become more isolated, Alicent lost another child, we have Aegon coming back, and Aemon remains dangerous. The dragons are increasingly becoming weapons controlled by emotionally unstable people. So basically, everything is going great in Westeros. It's absolutely fantastic. No notes. I'm sure season 4 will be 8 episodes of peaceful negotiations and responsible conflict resolution. Yeah, right. If you believe that, boy, I got some beachfront property in Oklahoma I will sell you for a great deal. So, my final rating for episode 8 is a 9.5 out of 10. It wasn't perfect, close, but not quite, but one of the strongest House of the Dragon episodes, and potentially one of the most important. Because after this episode, I don't think the question is who should sit on the Iron Throne. The question is what will be left when somebody finally dies. And Helena may have already given us the answer: blood, fire, dragons, and a throne surrounded by ruin. That is the tragedy. Everybody thinks they're fighting to inherit Westeros. But if they keep going like this, they're going to inherit a graveyard. And with that, season 3, House of the Dragon, is officially in the books. Olaf has gone full. If I'm unhappy, everybody's unhappy. Ormond learned why you should never bully someone with a dragon. Roddy the Ruin died doing exactly what Roddy the Ruin apparently wakes up every morning hoping to do. Damon discovered war isn't merely as romantic when you're walking through the bodies afterwards. Aegon has apparently decided death is merely a suggestion. Rhaenyra has gone from I am the rightful heir to Destiny personally subscribed to my newsletter. And Helena. Helena may have understood the ending before any of them understood the beginning. And that might make her the most tragic character in this entire story. So, until season 4, I'm gonna need you to keep those dragons fed, keep Olaf away from the alcohol, keep Ormond away from management positions, which I don't know if Hale has those. And actually, well, never mind that last one. And if a Targaryen starts talking about prophecy, run! Because apparently nothing good happens after somebody in this family says, I had a dream. So, until next time, I hope you've enjoyed the reviews of House of Dragons Season 3. I have enjoyed doing them. I will find something new to review. Football season's back, so look for maybe some football reviews coming up soon. You can also, if you're into wrestling, you can also listen to some of my wrestling takes. Make sure you follow my guy Reese at the Weekly Steel Chair to see me on Lipsticks and Lariats on Sunday. You can get all that in the description below. I'll hook you up with some links. Check out everybody I put down there. They're all great people if you like different stuff. So until next time, which will be in a few years, I don't have House of Dragon to talk about anymore. So maybe within the next few years we can have a peaceful Westeros. See you guys next time.